Everyone, welcome back to another episode. I've got today someone very special, David Emerald. He's an author. Well, he does multiple things, but really he teaches frameworks around leadership and teamwork and productivity. And for myself, I'll just personally say how I got turned on to David's work. It was going from being what he calls a hero to a coach, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But essentially, I've realized in relationships, whether it's relationally with girlfriends or others in my life, I've taken this part of it, and I'll talk about it, the two triangles, but this approach where I've tried to come in and be the savior and save the day and feel great about myself, and instead of really being a coach and empowering someone to actually find the solution themselves. So we'll get into all the different frameworks and triangles, and David can tell us more. But David, thank you so much for joining us, brother. It's really a pleasure.
Anthony, looking forward to our conversation. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks again, brother. I'd love for, I think you and I talked. We've got a tremendous amount of entrepreneurs or salespeople or people that are just early on their entrepreneurial journey. And your framework, I wish I had discovered years ago when I had just started becoming a manager and a leader, and whether that's in my community or family or friend circle, but in business specifically, it would have been incredibly helpful. Or for me, again, relationships I talked about. Can you explain the DDT and TED, the triangles, or even before that, just the impetus of the framework in itself?
Sure. Actually, I'll take a half step back, Anthony, and then get into the triangles and say that that both books, and I'll mention both books in a moment, really do come out of my experience and my exploration over decades around leadership. And the two books, The Power of TED, which is the one that you are most familiar with, is a fable that I characterize around self-leadership. And I characterize it that way because I have a foundational belief, if you will, that all leadership starts with self-leadership, that the way we lead our own lives has everything to do with how we lead in organizations, our families, our communities, et cetera. And then that book was published, actually, the first edition was published back in 2006, and continues to be quite popular, and I'm grateful to say, and I feel really blessed to do this work, by the way. And then about in 2019, and partly because of my organizational background, and I've spent probably, 40% of my career inside organizations and some significant leadership roles, and then the rest of my career externally. A lot of my background is in leadership education, but I published the 3 Vital Questions, Transforming Workplace Drama. And that book is contextualized in organizations and is also a fable, but it brings the frameworks from the empowerment dynamic, or TED, into an organizational context in a much more applied way. So I just wanted to kind of set that context.
I appreciate it, and I loved the concept you talked about, thinking about how we think, or the introspection piece that you mentioned early on, and also outside of that, for me, again, so much of this applies to business in the workplace, but I would encourage everyone, as you're listening to our conversation with David, is to apply it to your relationships outside of just the workplace. So that's actually, believe it or not, where I've seen a monumental gain in my relationships has been outside of the workplace, even though I know that's the potential draw for most people in the structure.
Well, wonderful. I appreciate that, Anthony. Let me also set a little bit of context for the 3 vital questions. And I think in terms of our conversation, I am going to focus the conversation more from the 3 vital questions frame, because, as you know, it transcends and includes what is in the Power of TED. And so I think, for those who are managers or leaders, entrepreneurs in organizations, I think there are a couple important considerations. I'll try to make this quick, but one has to do with the cost of drama in organizations and why we focus on reducing the amount of drama. We're never going to totally get away, totally eliminate drama in workplaces. My golly, when you've got 2 or 3 people together, the potential for drama is always going to be there. But there is one statistic that I do want to share here that has really stayed with me that I found in some research, and that is the estimate is that managers spend somewhere between 25 to 40% of their time dealing with drama. Excuse
Wow.
the air quotes, but
No, no,
I
no, no,
need to put that because there's a lot of forms of drama. I mean, it could be conflict and it could be just disagreements. Um, but I had someone point out to me an implication of that statistic. So here it is. So if you take the traditional 40-hour work week, and again,
Yes.
that's historically traditional,
Sure.
and you apply 40% to the 40-hour work week, that means that managers are spending 2 days a week dealing with drama.
Wow.
And
Unbelievable.
if we were able to reduce that by half and redirect that energy to stakeholders, customers, teammates, et cetera, what that would do for our workplaces. And then the second piece I want to share is what I call the challenge of change. And there's a lot of research that's been done over the years about the number of change efforts in organizations that fail to produce their intended results. And that could be anywhere from crash and burn to it taking longer, not having the returns, et cetera. And when I heard some of those early statistics, it caused me to really ponder what is systemically contributing to that poor success rate. And what I found was a way of thinking about organizations. And I think for your folks, this would be useful for me to slow down a little bit and for them to think about. And this comes from some early work of Peter Senge's. And that is that any organization has three dimensions of work. He just referred to it as A, B, and C. So the A dimension of work is the work itself, the products, services, delivery. The B dimension of work, which to me is the realm of management, is the work of the systems, processes, and structures that are in place to get the work done. And those two dimensions of work are explicit in organizations, but there is a third dimension of work that is taking place, whether it's done consciously or unconsciously. And that's the C dimension of work, which is the dimension of working on and being aware of thinking about how we think, thinking about how we relate, and thinking about how we take action. And the three vital questions are firmly embedded in that C dimension of work. And when I came across that, I went, I think one of the reasons why so many change efforts fail is that most change efforts are focused at the B dimension of work. Let's just reorganize, let's just restructure, et cetera. And if we don't step back and ask these questions, our chances of sustainable, successful, long-term change is really diminished. So I wanted to start with that framework. And then what I'd be happy to walk through with you and with those who are listening is just kind of a high level verbally looking at what the three questions are and what the work is around.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And I'm curious, came out of that when we talk about drama, because that's an enormous percentage. And I'm even starting to think back on like even my morning, like where, what I'm going to classify drama is. Could you define, your definition of drama for us? Because it's not, maybe people crying in the bathroom. You're like, I don't have 25% of people crying in the bathroom, but by from reading your work, I have a understanding of what drama is, but it'd be helpful for everyone to understand your definition.
Well, I appreciate the question, and I don't have an operational definition, but sure. I would tell you that to me, drama is frankly any thought, any interaction that gets us off the focus on outcomes and what we're trying to create. And so whether it's disagreements, whether it's, I remember one of my favorites that comes from early work of, Peter Block, is that, this is a real specific, but this is an example of drama. This is an example of drama that often is not seen specifically as drama. Beautiful. And that is, he observed in his looking at organizational politics, he talked about politics of manipulation versus politics of authenticity. And one of the examples of politics of manipulation is that the real meetings do not happen in the meeting room. They get pre-staged, or there's meetings during the breaks, that there's workarounds, et cetera. And to me, that's just an example. And I'll give you another quick example, because I experienced this in a large organization I was in, as name dropping. So again, it's part of the manipulation, which in any manipulation is drama. It is name dropping. So let's say you're my CEO and I'm trying to convince a colleague of something, and I say, "Hey, George, I want to run this idea by you and see what you think. I ran it by Anthony. He really likes it, but I want to see what you think."
Yes.
Yeah. So drama can be the crying in the bathroom. It can be the real conflict, but it can be really subtle. And so to me, it's anything that drains energy and focus away from what it is we're trying to create and who we're trying to serve.
That makes total sense. Yeah, it's I guess when your emotional intelligence needs to kick in, for lack of better words. And the one thing, or that's my interpretation anyway.
Sure.
The one thing that was really interesting. You said a lot of interesting things, but real meetings don't happen in the meeting room. I'm gonna digest that a little bit more today, especially in this virtual world and an environment that we work in. How to best replicate that outside of it and digitally, if you will, where everyone's working
Mm-hmm.
remote. Very very
Yeah.
interesting. But I want to get in, if you're okay with it. I want to get into you're describing the two triangles, the DDT and TED, for people to understand just the different
Sure.
quadrants of it and how they relate and everything about it.
Right.
Because I think we could spend hours even just going down that, which is really
Yeah.
beautiful work.
Yeah, we could, and thank you so much. And let me give again context, just a little bit of patience. We'll get to the
Please,
triangles here
no,
in
we're
just a
loving it.
minute, but I want to start with the first vital question, which is where are you putting your focus? And
Yes.
are you focusing on problems or are you focusing on outcomes? So if one's focus, I use an acronym of FISBE, that what we focus on engages an inner state, IS, emotional state that then drives behavior. So in the problem orientation, our focus is on problems and engages some level of fear-based anxiety, which then drives reactive behavior. And I think sufficient for our conversation just to tee that up. Whereas focusing on outcomes, our focus is on what we want to create, and if we care about it, it taps into our passion because we care about it. Gives us that inner state, gives us the energy to take whatever the next baby step in the creative process is that gets us closer to or clearer about that outcome. And so in the problem orientation, our focus is on what we don't want. We try to get away from the anxiety that we're feeling. And it can lead to short-term change, but not sustainable change. Whereas the outcome orientation just ends up being a virtuous cycle. So I wanted to start there because I use the acronym in both books of AIR, AIR, because these two mindsets, these two operating systems create very different environments. They have very different airs about them. So now we'll go into the second vital question, which is how are you relating? And how are you relating to others? How are you relating to your experience, what's going on around you? And frankly, how are you relating to yourself? And are you relating in ways that produce or perpetuate drama, which will be the drama triangle I'll describe in a moment? Or are you relating in ways that empowers others and yourself to be more resourceful, resilient, and innovative, which will take us into TED or the empowerment dynamic. So if either as an individual or a team, organization, any relationship, if it's operating from that problem orientation, that is fertile ground for what I call the dreaded drama triangle, or DDT, because of the toxic nature of these relationship roles and dynamics. And the relationship roles and dynamics in the DDT, the central role is the role of victim. And we are in the victim role anytime we're complaining, anytime we feel powerless, hopeless. I do want to make a distinction that's really important between victimization and victimhood. And victimization is something that as human beings we all experience, and it's part of the human experience. I think of it on the scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being I'm stuck in traffic again, 10 being our friends in Ukraine as we have this conversation. So broad range of victimization, that's different than victimhood, which is a way of being, self-identity, et cetera. So this work challenges victimhood while acknowledging the reality of victimization in our world. So we all occupy that victim role from time to time. In order to be a victim, one must have a persecutor. So the persecutor could be a person, could be a condition, health condition, it could be a situation, natural disaster. and it dominates the time and attention of the victim. And so once the dynamic between the victim and the persecutor gets engaged, then the third role that completes the triangle is the role of rescuer, or you labeled it as hero, which is and I can attest
rescuer.
as a
Yes.
as a recovering rescuer myself, how many times, well-intentioned as a manager and leader, I would intervene in an attempt to be helpful, only to realize, eventually, I came to realize that at times my heroic intervention was actually robbing the victim of their own power. So the drama triangle, and we all play all three roles of victim, persecutor, rescuer, and we can ping pong around them. I mean, how many times have you been in a meeting? Have I been in a meeting? And looking back, I played all three roles as it shifts and morphs. So that is the kind of relationship dynamics that show up in that problem orientation operating system. If we can upgrade our operating system, so to speak, to the outcome focused, passion based, creative behavior, then that creates the conditions for the antidote to the toxic DDT. And the antidote is the empowerment dynamic, or what we lovingly call TED. And so the roles that make up the empowerment dynamic and their relationship to the DDT roles, the basic shift and the most powerful shift is the shift from victim to creator. And as a creator, to me, there are two major components of our creator essence, and that is our ability to envision and to create outcomes. But equally important is our ability and frankly, our responsibility to realize that we are always at choice, that we can choose our response to whatever's going on in our lives. And out of that notion of that we are always at choice, and sometimes the range of choices is very narrow, other times there can be almost too many choices. But from that place of choice, when a person, condition, or circumstance shows up in our experience, and we might have reacted to it as a persecutor, from a creator stance, we can look at that person, condition, and circumstance as a challenger. So a challenger is the antidote to the role of persecutor. And challengers in our lives call forth learning and growth. That's the basic notion of the challenger. It's being able to say, you know, sometimes we have positive challengers that challenge us to learn and grow and develop. And other times we have situations that show up that are unwanted and unwelcome, but being able to pause and say, oh, what's here for me to learn? How do I choose to respond? That's the nature of the challenger. And then the helping role. And again, I want to acknowledge that many of us, and again, as a recovering rescuer, are well-intentioned. The antidote to the role of rescuer is the role of coach. It doesn't have to be a professional coach. The idea of the coach is that the coach role says, Anthony, I see you as a creator in your own right, whether you act like it or not, whether you know it or not. So I'm leaving the power with you, and I'm going to support you through asking questions to help you clarify outcomes, to help you clarify your current realities, to help you clarify the baby steps that you're committed to take. But I leave the power with you as a creator, rather than as a rescuer. It's like I see you needing my help, and I see you as a victim. As a coach, I see you as a creator and see the creator essence in you. So again, problem orientation creates an environment in which the DDT thrives. Adopting an outcome orientation as a creator creates the conditions for co-creation, for challenge, supporting one another as challengers and coaches.
So much to digest in there, man. That was so beautiful. And selfishly, I'm going to double click on the coach versus, you know, what I call hero, but rescuer. Sure. But just to step back at the beginning, you know, I love this quote. I think it's a Tony Robbins quote: "Where focus goes, energy flows." And it's yes. It's funny as far as that, you know, what you're focused on is what you get more of. And I, you know, just in preparation for our interview today, I was thinking this morning, my girlfriend woke up and she goes, I had bad dreams. And jokingly, I was like chanting, no more bad dreams, no more bad dreams, no more bad dreams. And I'm like, I'm focused on the problem. So I started going, good dreams, good dreams, good dreams, good. And it was just a funny little little shift, it's
Mhm.
so much of a different framework to come from, to focus on the outcome, or what you want, not the problem, so
Well, yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome example. It makes me think. Last week I was with a leadership team in Dallas, and one of their phrases that they use in their culture is "no drama," and it's like I wanted to be subtle about this, but that too is a no
focusing on
drama is a problem focus, and it's
yes,
like so it's
more
I
abundance,
encourage
or whatever. Yep.
I encourage that the focus be building empowerment, right?
Yes,
So,
it's
yeah.
it's so funny, and you also said that focusing on the problem might yield a short term, um, you know, gain or solution, but it's not sustainable in long term. That makes me think of when people are like saying, "I operate better when I'm stressed," and we know science shows it's not true by any means that you operate. And again, you might have a little fire under your butt for a short term kind of kick, but long term that's not going to be sustainable, as you and I both know.
Well, and here's why I think this is useful to share is that here's why it's not sustainable. What really drives that problem focused orientation is anxiety, the stress that you're talking about, and and if I take action that actually temporarily helps the presenting problem, my anxiety diminishes and I lose energy for action because that it's anxiety that's really driving that operating system. And that's really important for people to know because one of the things that when we dive deeper in workshops is that the problem orientation is not a problem solving orientation. It's a problem reacting orientation. And as a colleague pointed out, not only is it not a problem solving orientation, it's actually an anxiety management system.
Interesting.
And that's how central that stressor of fear, and again, it's fear-based anxiety because even in the creating process, we can experience anxiety. And this is
Yes.
a little wordy, but the difference about our relationship to anxiety between those two orientations is in the problem orientation, anxiety has us. In creating outcomes, we can have anxiety without anxiety, and we can have it and say, "Oh, yeah, I'm feeling anxious, and I'm going to move forward."
Yes.
So we can have that anxiety without it having us.
Very interesting. Thank you for clarifying that, because I know that is a wrongful bias. See, I hear often things like that, like I operate better under stress. I've got a interesting, a little bit tangent, but an interesting situation I want to get your take on. So
Okay.
today is, it's like, so I've got this theory that people operate from DDT instead of TED, right? Or a problem versus an outcome framework, because they actually get rewarded in society, and it's an easier way to
Mhm.
connect together. And I had this thought. I said, if I posted on Facebook that I just finished a marathon, yeah, people comment, great job, you're the man, love it. If I posted on Facebook, I'm in the hospital and sick as a dog, I guarantee you I get 15 phone calls, 35 texts. I might get people showing up at the hospital. So I get disproportionately rewarded in
Mhm.
connection and love when I'm a victim than when I'm a creator in a lot of ways. And I just want to get your take on that. Maybe you agree, don't agree with that. That's just something I've been just like chewing on over the last few months, is that concept.
Right. Well, I think what you're really speaking to, Anthony, and what you're experiencing, pondering, is that actually the problem orientation is our default operating system as human beings. And frankly, and I don't want people to hear that the problem orientation is necessarily bad. It's just limiting.
Yes.
And the reason why I say it's not bad, it's what's helped us survive as a species. That when our forefathers, foremothers, our forebears were eking out existence, they had to be scanning for problems and be ready to react if the tiger in the grass or the snake in the grass or whatever showed up. And because it is our default operating system, it again creates that we could spend hours on this. So the roles of victim, persecutor, and rescuer. It's my experience that one of those roles tends to be a what I would call a primary role that one goes to when they are in a drama relationship. And I think we both admit that we tend to go to rescuer, and society tends to reinforce that more. But we learn the behaviors and we learn those roles very early in our lives. And they too become our default patterns. And that's why so many people, when they learn about the drama triangle, and I need to give the attribution that the drama triangle was actually developed by Dr. Stephen Cartman, and is often referred to as the Cartman drama triangle. And I know that when I first learned about the drama triangle, or the Cartman drama triangle, it's what I call a blinding flash of the obvious, meaning it's like, wow, boy, does that describe my life?
Right.
And so it is if the problem orientation is our default, then in a sense, our default around relationships often is that drama there. I mean, the way that we get positive reinforcement for being rescuers is by fixing and taking care of others, right? And
Yes.
and so again, we could go deeply into that, but that what I feel very, I'm going to use a little bit of spiritual language here, blessed, graced with having had the initial epiphany now some 30 years ago that the opposite of victim is creator. One of the things that if you go and you do an internet search on the drama triangle, and by the way, you'll find variations, like there are some depictions that have hero rather than rescuer.
Sure.
But basically what you'll find is people say, well, now that you know about the
David,
drama.
it made me feel better calling myself a hero versus a rescuer.
Of course. But what you'll find is a lot of good stuff out there, but basically what will be in some way said is, now that you know about it, just don't do it anymore. And that's not sufficient for transformation. And so I feel very humbled, if you will, that Dr. Cartman, who's in his late 80s now, actually endorsed the power of 10 after initially turning me down, because he said that he hadn't endorsed anything for 35 years. And he finally came back and he said, this is the best escape from the drama triangle I've ever seen. And that's what went on the book. So and I'm sharing that because just knowing about the drama triangle is not sufficient for escaping it, so to speak, or transforming or transcending it. We need to have a place to go. And that's what the empowerment dynamic offers to people. And it's a lifelong journey. And I go reactive. I find myself in drama. So again, this notion that victimization and being in drama is part of the human experience. But if we can recognize it sooner, make conscious choices, that's what this journey is all about.
And David, I'm kind of walking into this one, but is there any daily practices to be able to start rewriting those rules? Because I don't know, I was kind of like, okay, so then why am I not, and not that I don't fall into sometimes, but why am I not, I don't default to a victim or a persecutor? And, then I review back, I remember like falling and starting to cry as a kid. And my mom goes, get up, you're fine, get up, get up, get up. And I was like, okay. Right. So I learned to not be a victim, right? And persecutor, I remember my dad saying the worst thing you can do is snitch on someone. The worst thing you can do is tell on someone. It was like, it was shunned. It was actually praised if you didn't tell on someone and you knew, right? Like, so I was like, okay, persecutor, not trained. But then rescuer, like you said, like my brother fell and I picked him up. That was, I was praised as the rescuer or hero, as I'll call it. Mm-hmm. So for myself, moving from rescuer to coach, what are, or someone, who might be, and I think this is probably a little bit more prevalent in society today, the victim, actually all three are very prevalent, of course, but, I'm specifically thinking of a friend who's going to watch this, going from victim to actual creator. Like, what daily practices do you, or have you put in your life or seen people to be able to start rewriting those rules? Because again, thankfully I feel blessed that I was raised to, and I'm very spiritual as well too. So feel free to use God blessing, whatever,
Right.
So,
Great.
but I'm very blessed that I didn't realize that posting on Facebook that I had a really bad day and I hate my life got me more attention than saying, oh, I just had accomplished a great podcast interview, right? Like, even though, like, really, if you look at it objectively, like, at least from the surface, I should be doing more of this, right? But obviously, as we talked about, it doesn't satisfy long term, and it's limiting. That was my favorite thing. I love that you said it's limiting. Yes, agreed. You get that, but it's limiting, and I thought that was so beautiful. But just I'm going in circles here. But daily practices, anything to move.
Yeah. Well, I'll share a little bit about some of my daily practice. I start every morning with at least 15 minutes of just my form of meditation. I'm a big fan of an app called Insight Timer, and then I also do some praying after that, and I do some inspirational reading, and then I look at my day ahead, and I think part of it is asking the question, how do I want to show up today? I'm going to be talking to Anthony. How do I want to show up in that? Not from an egoic standpoint, but how can I be present? And then I think at the end of the day, being able to look back over the course of the day and asking questions of oneself about, what orientation was I operating from in that experience, and how might I would I change anything? And it's really that kind of reflection that over time, and very important, I think, to say to you and to others, is in doing that reflection back on the day, don't beat yourself up. I mean, that the reality is
huge to hear.
That we all go reactive. So to me, it is if it's 2 steps up to 1 step back, that's making progress. And to borrow a phrase from 12-step recovery, it's about progress, not perfection.
Yes.
And one of the things that does happen sometimes is people learn about the empowerment dynamic. They say, I want to always be a co-creator. I want to be a challenger. I want to be a coach. And again, just like in organizations, to say no drama is not realistic. Thinking that we can always be in those empowered roles is not realistic. And but it's about progress, and you can't make the shift without some sort of a pause practice. And so my morning routine is my daily pause practice, if you will.
Dude, pause meditation. Some people has it's got an icky word for a lot of people. Pause practice. I've never heard that. That's beautiful word choice. Pause practice. That is, I'm going to start incorporating that because, tell my dad, yeah, I'm meditating. He's like, what are you freaking, doing some crazy Buddha stuff, it's like whatever.
Right.
Pause practice. That's so great. And I think one thing that for myself that was really great to hear there is the don't beat yourself up. That beat yourself up is really, just a lesson that I think everyone could hear and should hear. And I had someone tell me about a year and a half ago, they said, who's your best friend in the world? Said, oh, my brother, Steven. Go, if he missed the shot in basketball, or if he didn't close a deal, how would you talk to him? I say, I tell him it's okay. He'll get it next time. All this stuff. He goes, why aren't you talking to yourself that way? And I was just like,
that's great.
I started going into like, anytime I started beating myself up, I go, how would you respond? How would you tell Steven to fix that? And it is like a night. I go from a 10 out of 10 beat session down to 1.5 or 2, which is probably where it needs to be. And you said, what you call pause practice. Again, I'm going to steal that if I may.
Sure.
I think you really talk about just being purposeful with your life, and it's a great quote. I think it's another Tony Robbins quote. I'm going to keep quoting him today. He's on top of my mind. I listened to him this morning. But most people spend more time planning their next vacation than they do their life, and that's so. I think that for such a strong portion of my life, that was so true. I spent literally more time planning my Europe trip than I have, who do I want to be today? What do I want my day to look like? End of the day, saying, what did I do well? Where can I improve? And you mentioned the pause practice being 15 minutes. If you don't have 15 minutes, you don't have a life.
Right. Well, and what you just inherently teed up, Anthony, I want to thank you, is really brings us to the third vital question.
Yes.
which is what actions are you taking? And again, if you're operating from problem orientation, drama filled, your actions are just going to be reactions to whatever the next incoming is. Whereas from that outcome oriented creator orientation, and the dynamics of creator, challenger, coach, the actions that we take are actions that are in service to the outcomes that we want to create in our lives. And the basic model that informs that third vital question is derived from the work of a guy named Robert Fritz, who called it structural tension, creative tension. I call it dynamic tension. And it's basically a three-step process. I'm going to do it in five quick steps. But the idea is that we create outcomes by first and foremost focusing on what is it that we want to create, answering that question. And it could be outcomes could be, clear and concrete, like I want to get my master's degree. And it may be more vague and directional. It's like how I want to show up in my relationships. But we always starts with outcomes, so that because that anchors us in that outcome orientation. The second step is that we then need to tell the truth about current reality. And there are two basic aspects of current reality: being able to answer what's going on in current reality that supports what I want, and what's going on in current reality that is inhibiting, that's an obstacle, that's getting in the way. And that's where problems exist in that outcome orientation, because I don't want anybody to think that we don't solve problems even when we are in that more empowered place. But in that more empowered place, we can identify what are the problems that we really need to get to root cause around, because they stand in they are obstacles to what it is that we really care about. So it's called dynamic tension because I'm going to pick up, I always have rubber band handy.
I was just going to ask you about the dynamic tension. Yeah.
Because there is a tension between what we want, the outcome, and our current reality. And then if we've told the truth about our current reality, both supports and inhibits, then we identify what are the baby steps that we can begin to take from current reality toward our envisioned outcome. So again, it's step one, outcome; step two, current reality; step three, what's going on in current reality that supports; step four is what's inhibiting; and then step five is baby steps. And the idea of baby steps is that they are short term. They are things that you can take action on. It's not about getting another person to take action. And the idea here is that we take baby steps, and then once we've taken those baby steps, we assess: was it forward progress? Was it a mistake or a step back that we can adjust and learn from? And one of the things I tell people is you never know when a baby step is going to be a quantum leap or a breakthrough that would not have happened had you not taken that baby step. So that's how we create outcomes, is through harnessing this idea of dynamic tension.
And for the step two, when I read your book, I read between the lines. I don't know if you explicitly said this, but see problems as they are, but not worse than they are. Because I think a lot of times I see a problem, and it's like you do want to recognize and see the problem as it is, but not worse than it is. So
Right.
That was something that really helped ground me back to, okay, where's the real problem here? Not this made up, this anxiety or fear-based problem side that all of a sudden grows into there's a huge monster when really there's a fly.
Yeah, right.
So that's great. Can you touch on why, through that process of dynamic tension, why a lot of people aren't able to get to the other side of the outcome, outside of coming from what you're talking about, and maybe this is a DDT that was starting from a problem outlook, but why during that, if you could touch through some of the challenges along that, use the rubber band, the tension,
Right,
where the fall off is, or why some people don't get to their side.
right. So I'm going to go back to I'm going to use my rubber band in that. So once that tension is engaged, I remember I said a little while ago as we were chatting that creating outcomes is not anxiety free, that we can experience anxiety. And often when we engage this tension between what we want, the outcome, and what we have, current reality, very often anxiety shows up. It's like, oh, I don't know if I've got enough time. I don't know if I've got enough resources, whatever the the anxiety chatter is that is going on in our heads. And so there are three basic ways that we could resolve the tension. But that's the reason why Robert Fritz called this a structural tension that seeks resolution. A little bit of theory there, but that if we give ourselves over to the anxiety, the easiest thing we can do is to compromise the vision and see how that releases the tension, but it doesn't get us any closer to what it is that we really care about. And as a good friend of mine, Bob Anderson, who I've done a lot of this work with, loves to say, said, we can't invest our souls in a compromise. You know, we know when there's a part of us that knows that we're settling for something less than our true heart's desires. The second thing we can do in reaction to the anxiety is not tell the truth about current reality. And that speaks a little bit to what you're saying about being able to see the problem just as it is rather than making it into something that's bigger. It's also being able to, so what can happen is we can minimize, explain away, deny current reality as a reactive strategy to, so depending on what the outcome is, it could be, you know, it's not as bad as it seems, or it's not as good as it seems. And whereas the real practice is to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about current reality. And then the way that this really works, which I've already described, is that, so part of the discipline of being a creator is being able to hold this tension and to not react to it, and to be mindful of, so what are, you know, I tend to work in 3 steps. So what are 3 things I can do in the next 30 days? Or maybe depending on the focus, it could be, what are 3 things I can do today that are going to be baby steps in service to that bigger outcome that I want? So my answer to your question is, a lot of people don't allow themselves to really want what they want in terms of outcomes, or they compromise it, or they just want to react to what's going on in current reality, instead of being able to step back and say, let me see, you know, it is as it is. And, you know, part of the quote that I think you're referring to, which actually comes from a CEO, he said something like, what determines our destiny is not the hand we're dealt, it's how we play the hand. And the way to play the hand is to see reality for what it is and to act accordingly.
That's beautiful. I haven't heard that one quite like that. That's amazing. And I think my favorite part about your work and your books are, you know, change can sometimes seem so esoteric or so far away, so out
Right.
there. And it seems like, you know, someone wants to lose 30 pounds, 50 pounds. It seems like a massive undertaking. My favorite thing about your framework and your books and is like you said, like the baby steps that we take to get there. And I think Will Smith has this analogy. Maybe he's not the best guy to use an analogy today based off recent events, but I do like his motivational work, or you know, from years past. But
I agree.
talks about his talks about his father, you know, saying you're going to build this wall, and he said you don't set out to build a wall, you lay a brick. The most perfect way a brick can be laid every day, and soon you have a wall. And he said it's one of the best lessons he learned. And I think for myself or for people listening, like that baby step is and you know, what am I going to do today just 1% better than I did yesterday, is, you know, you just break it down in such bite-sized chunks where you say, you know what, I can do this. I can just spend 15 minutes in the morning or 5 minutes in the evening reflecting. It's not this massive undertaking of, oh my God, my life's gonna be upside down and it's gonna be terrible and it's gonna suck, you know, and I'll never get there.
Right. Well, and actually, I want to build on that, build on the Will Smith, who I do have, except for his what happened. I have a lot of respect for the way he approaches a lot of life. And I happened to just recently watch King Richard, which was an excellent movie, by the way. And so there's an example that my partner Donna Zajon uses that illustrates what you're saying. And the story is that she was out walking one day, and she has a lot of conversation in her own head that happens. And she was out walking. Said, "Okay, Donna, it's time to lose those 20 pounds again." And anytime we language something around losing, getting rid of, it's almost always problem oriented. And one of the ways that the problem orientation gets illustrated is we tend to have a roller coaster relationship. It's like we react, things get better, things get better. We stop acting because the anxiety goes down. And so she knew that. And she said, oh, and it's the reason why she said to herself, losing that 20 pounds again. And she did some internal coaching. She said, so what is it I really want? And what she came back from her walk with, which said, what I really want, and this is just a great outcome statement, is I want optimal health as I age. I want optimal health as I age. And so what that led to were baby steps like one of her daughters is a nutritionist, buying healthier food. So it's that brick at a time. It's the little baby steps that over the course of a year, she dropped the 20 pounds, but that was not what she was focused on. It was taking the healthy steps to put in place the systems and processes that could help support optimal health as she ages.
That's so beautiful. I have the pleasure of a good friend and mentor, Les Brown of mine, and one of the first things when we met was in person, and we met several times. Is what the most powerful weapon is on the planet, Anthony? And I thought about it, and I was like, I don't. He's like, no, what is it? Nuclear bombs. The tongue. The tongue is the most powerful weapon on the entire planet. And I was like, oh man, it's so, just that language change that you just mentioned there might seem like a subtle shift to someone, or no more drama, no more bad dreams, so good dreams, good dreams, good dreams. It seems like such a small shift, but the tongue is the most powerful weapon on the entire planet. Yeah, you can be on your team or against you based on that. And I think what you just said there sums that up very well. And yeah, I know we only have a few more minutes, but I wanted to again selfishly circle back to the rescuer versus the coach, and outside of maybe it's the response is going to be circle back to what I said earlier, knucklehead, which is very fair to say. But moving from this, I have this tendency of someone's got a financial problem, let's throw money at it. Here you go. No problem. I'll take care of it. Or, hey, you don't like your job. No problem. We'll take care of this. Or I'll get you set up over here. I'll go do this. And again, it's this fallacy, and I'm aware of it now, which is I think a great step. We talk about the 12 steps of recovery, admission. But I still find myself more often than I'd like slipping into that rescuer role. And again, I get back to, I was not purposefully condemning someone who says, oh, my life's terrible, and everyone hugs them and does them. I get a tremendous amount of praise in my life for being a rescuer. And I feel really amazing about myself being a rescuer, but I know it's limiting. I think that was a great word choice to use. I didn't really know how to put a definition on it. I know it's limiting versus being a coach. And I just wanted to get your last few minutes here, just any spew towards me that might be helpful in that process.
Sure. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the vulnerability and being authentic there. And I've got two thoughts that come to mind. One very quickly, I want to say that I want to build on the idea of limiting. All three of the drama roles, victim, persecutor, rescuer, they're not bad. There are times where they may be reasonable and appropriate. It's just that they're limiting. And so if someone is truly in danger, if someone is, then being a rescuer may be very reasonable and appropriate. So I wanted to say that. The other thing is that I'm going to share with you a little mantra, if you will, a little convention that occurred to me years ago in some of my executive coaching, leadership training. And so the saying is to ask first, tell second. Ask first, tell second. And what I heard in your description is that your default, and this is the default for a lot of hero managers, is to tell first, ask second. Here's the way I want to illustrate that. Is that, let's say that you're a direct report of mine, just to set context, and you come to me and you say, David, I've got this issue. What do you think I should do? If I'm defaulting to tell first, ask second, I'm likely to say, well, Anthony, if I were you, I would do A, B, C, and D. What else have you thought of? See how that's a tell first, ask second?
Yes.
Here's what becomes available to flip that around and ask first, tell second. So you come to me, lay out the situation. I'm thinking A, B, C, and D, but I step into the coach role and I say, Anthony, I've got some thoughts, but what have you thought of so far? What do you think are the possibilities?
Yes.
You're likely to say something like, well, I've thought about it. I think I should do A, B, D, and E. Now I've got a great opportunity to reinforce your thinking. Say, Anthony, I think A, B, and D are spot on. Hadn't thought about E. I think that's a great idea. The only thing I would add is I'd suggest that you also do C. Now you're going to go off much more highly motivated because you're creating the solution and the outcome that I reinforced as a leader and added to. But I started with, what have you thought of? And asking that question, so that it can be very powerful to remember to ask first, tell second.
That's beautiful. I will remind myself of that daily, because it's also funny because it's, continuing down that vulnerability path in the workplace and in business. I think I do a relatively solid job of that. I remember I had someone hired on would call me, what do I do? And what do you think? Or I wait an hour to call back. I go, what's going on? I'm like, oh no, I figured it out. And slowly that dissipated. And now that this person's a major leader in our organization and incredible at what they do. Family, friends, and relationship is where the ask first, tell second. I'm going to put a major emphasis on applying, because those areas are where I definitely struggle more, which is funny because I've gotten the results I wanted out of being a coach in business, and I'm not getting the results I want out of relationship, family, friends, but I continue to use the same habits and patterns. So I appreciate that a ton. That's again back to your bite-sized digestible chunk size. It's a very, very, very approachable thing.
Well, I do have so this is coming from the challenger place.
Please.
Because I'm going to make a statement, because challengers tend to make statements and challengers can make suggestions, whereas coaches are using questions. So here's my challenge to you,
Please.
Anthony, in those personal relationships, is to tell the people who that you've got that pattern with, to share with them that you are committed to and that you're working on shifting from rescuer to coach. And what that means, so that that gives them the opening that if something happens and they feel like you're rescuing, they can say, wait a minute, time out. I think you're trying to fix me. I think and they can actually support you in creating those new neural pathways and those new behaviors because you have explicitly set up for them that that's a change that you're working on.
Thankfully, I've got a great partner in crime, my girlfriend, that will definitely hold me accountable. So that will be my first call after this interview. I appreciate it a ton. Brother, tell me where, we talked a little bit more, where people can go find you and double click and learn more on this. Because everyone listening, this has been, I got exposed to David's work through a friend who's part of a mastermind group that I have very high regards for. And it was in the rescuer coach. I was having a challenge in my life, and I talked to him, and he said, you're being a rescuer versus a coach. And I said, what are you even talking about? And I digested David's work, and I know for myself, I've made great strides, even though obviously we always have more work to do on these topics. And I firmly believe you'll have a tremendous shift in your quality of life by learning David's work and by working through it and doing the work yourself. And so please tell me the best place for people to really digest and learn this content.
Sure. I would recommend going to our website, which is theempowermentdynamic.com. And what will come up is the Center for the Empowerment Dynamic. And we have some offerings and some focus for individuals, for professionals, and for organizations. And I think if someone is hearing this anew, that's new to them, what I would really recommend is to enroll in our self-paced online e-course, because the title of the e-course, which brings both TED and 3VQ together, the title of the e-course is 3 Vital Questions Applying the Power of TED to Work and Life. And I think that encompasses all that we've been talking about, both in the organizational space as well as personal space. That would be my recommendation. But again, theempowermentdynamic.com.
I appreciate that, David. And you mentioned can't invest in your soul from a compromise, and I think anyone listening, the first step is taking action. And I urge everyone, and I will be myself enrolling in the 8 Unity course. And I'm very excited to learn more. And I really appreciate the time, brother. I can't tell you how immensely educational this has been, outside of what I was even expecting from setting up the call. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat and just the
Well, I
beautiful
love the
work you're doing.
conversation, Anthony. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Here's to
David. Have a great day.
here's to the creator in you. Yeah.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. And the coach, more importantly.
Enjoy your day, man.
Thank you, David. Talk soon, brother. Bye-bye.
Bye.